In this video, we're going to give you the latest update on the X-10 10-station progressive reloading press. Gavin here from ultimatereloader.com. I'm here with Michael Lindsay. Thank you for joining me, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
Mike is the engineer that has been working on this press at Frankford Arsenal for what, the last 3 years or so?
More or less.
Okay. We've been on camera together. I just did the progressive press shootout. What we wanted to talk to you all about was an update on public availability, which is summer 2022. We're going to talk about some of Mike's design philosophy and things that he likes about the press, and then talk about what's next. So let's start with the update. It is now June 2022 at the date of filming this video. We're right on the heels of the pilot program and public availability. Tell us about the pilot program.
So we've got a limited quantity of these machines coming in, and we really want to limit how many we put out in the public right off the bat, mostly because we want to take the time to really 100% inspect every unit that we're going to ship at first until we've really established our quality control procedures. And we just want to make sure we've got all the issues completely resolved before we get them in the hands of the consumers.
Well, I'm very proud to be the very first lab rat on this, and it's been really fun to get an early look at the machine, be the first person really in the public to get hands-on with it, and then to work with you directly to understand all of the features, get all of the latest design updates that you guys have gone through, the iterations to get this ready for this public release. And we've got a whole suite of videos we just finished filming for the Frankford Arsenal channels and the Frankford Arsenal website. They're going to show you how this machine is set up, everything that's included, caliber changes, pistol, and rifle. So I'll be giving all you further updates as I get them from Frankfurt Arsenal with regard to the pilot program, general public availability, and things that follow on after that. Now, let's talk about this press. This is kind of your baby, right?
Yep.
Talk to me a little bit about some of the experiences that you went through, some of the research that you did, and maybe a couple of the features that you're most proud of.
So I've been a reloader for years, and a lot of other people at Frankfurt have too, and we've used progressive presses, and a lot of them are great, but there's always some little things that, you know, we feel could be cleaned up. And we had a lot of experience collectively with a lot of different machines, and we really just tried to combine that. You know, there were some features of some of them that were great, and we wanted to make sure we at least matched that level of performance, and then there were some other things that we thought left a lot of room for improvement, so we wanted to make sure we addressed that. The biggest issue that I have with loading on a progressive is primer drawback. You know, it doesn't happen every time, but it happens enough that it is an issue.
Let's talk about what that is. So this is essentially the primer pin poking into the primer and it's sucking back and barely sitting in that primer pocket. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's really common on military cases where you know they're crimped in and they've got, it takes a lot of force to punch that primer out, and the primer just cups up around that pin and it pulls it back in. It doesn't come all the way in, but it just engages the case enough that it rides to the next station.
Which will jam things, right?
Yeah, and even if it doesn't jam the index, on a press that has inline swaging, it'll swage that primer back into the pocket, and then you'll crush a primer on the next station, or it'll jam the priming mechanism and fill it up with debris. So really, you want to eliminate that. And I've seen a lot of systems that other people had used, other companies, to try and eliminate that. I've seen a vacuum system where they try to suck the primer off the end of the pin with vacuum, and I've seen spring-loaded decapping pins, but in my mind, the best way to address that is just hit it a second time. So this press has two stations that will allow you to decap in them. So on this machine, we're running a universal decapper in station 2, and then we're running a resizer with a decapper in station 3.
This is a 9mm setup here. Yep. And what's interesting is if you take the shell plate off, you can see where in the press frame, it's kind of like a funnel, and they both funnel down, both of those die stations, underneath to the discharge hose. So one way or another, it's coming out, huh?
Yep, and they both go out the same outlet, and it's kind of satisfying because every now and then if you watch that, you'll see two come out at the same time, where one rode to the next station, and you know that that would have caused a problem if you didn't have that redundant decapping.
Nice. Let's talk about 10 stations. How did you land on that number?
There's just been a lot of talk of, you know, experienced reloaders saying they couldn't do all the operations that they wanted to do. Like they had to sacrifice powder check to run a bullet feeder. And I don't want to sacrifice powder check. I think that's a crucial step in the operation, and it just enhances the safety of what you're getting if you've verified on every single round that there is a correct amount of powder in that. So we added enough stations on this press that you can run bullet feed and seat and crimp along with a powder check. But in order to do the caveat to that is it will require a proprietary bullet feed system, which is coming from Frankford Arsenal, that will feed and seat in the same station.
Very cool. Okay, so let's quickly walk through the stations that I set up here for 9mm. So we've got dedicated decap in number 2. Number 1 is for the case feeder. Number 3 is our sizer deprimer, standard 9mm die. 4 is swaging. 5 is priming. 6 is case mouth expansion. 7 is powder charging. 8 is reserved for a powder check die. 9 is seat, and 10 is crimp. And like you said, in station essentially number 9, that would become the bullet feed system from Frankford Arsenal that will feed and seat in one station.
That's right.
And 10 sounds excessive if you're used to loading on a 5-station press, but when you get into the production mentality, individual manipulations of each variable, or each station in this case, gives you a lot of flexibility and saves a lot of pain and frustration. And if you've got these dies set up on a tool head and you pop that back on, 10 stations sounds like a lot to set up, but it's actually not that bad.
Yeah, and it never hurts, even if you don't use them all, it never hurts to have a couple extras. You know, if you're just doing casual reloading, maybe 5 or 6 is enough, but if you're going to get into serious, like heavy-duty case processing and you want to run like an inline trimmer, you know, you can do swage, resize, trim. You know, you could run a chamfer deburr tool. There's all kinds of options you could put on there. There's probably some things that haven't even been created yet that you could potentially put on this machine now that you have that space available and that flexibility.
Love that. Okay, so the priming system on this is a rotating wheel. It's like a gear that has 4 positions. That's a unique design. It runs off of the shell plate. There's a gear on the shell plate. As it runs, it spins that primer gear, essentially. How did you land on that design?
I really like the idea of a continuous and on-demand primer system, and I wanted to be sure that it was positively engaged to the shell plate, and I didn't want to rely on spring returns because I've used a lot of machines where they either don't go all the way to the seat station and you'll get a jam there, or they don't back up far enough to pick up a primer from the stack, and then you end up with a case that went through with no primer, and you don't have any way of verifying that until you see powder spilled all over the machine.
Right.
So on this one, there's 4 stations on the priming wheel. There's 4 positions, and the pickup is position 1, and the seat is position 3. So you've got a little witness hole right here where you can visually verify on every round that you have successfully staged a primer in that wheel and that it will be inserted into the case on the next cycle. And then on position 4, you have a second witness hole, and you can verify that primer is gone, meaning it has been successfully placed into that case.
One other important detail to note is the separation of those holes on the priming wheel. If they're far enough apart like they are on this design, if you detonate a primer in the priming station, it's not going to be able to explode the adjacent primer and then have a chain reaction, going up the tube.
Definitely, and I have actually set a couple off in this press because I broke a decapping pin and didn't realize it, so I got over to the priming station with a swaged-in primer and crushed it, and it went off, and there's no chance of a chain reaction. You're basically separated just as far from the seating station as you are with your next primer as you are from the primer column.
I think it's good that you've done that because that's a really important test scenario to have validated before you send this out into the wild, telling people that it's a safe machine.
Definitely.
Yeah, you kind of have to go through all of the different scenarios. How about the powder dropper? Let's talk about that.
So the powder dropper, this is also something that comes from me having some bad experiences with other machines where I loaded a lot of ammunition and then I would find the powder measure stuck in the up position where it wasn't returning. So this one has a physical reset rod that if you lower it and the powder measure activates, when you return this thing to the top of the stroke,
it's forcing it.
Yes, it forcibly resets that powder measure, so there's no chance of getting a squib because of a stuck powder measure.
And it's case activated, so if your case is in place, it has to get activated.
Yep, all the component feeds on this machine are case activated, so you can run an empty station all the way through and it won't cause any issues with priming, powder drop, or the bullet feed system.
Now, one thing I noticed setting this up, we set this up for 308 and for 9mm for our demo videos that we just filmed, is this powder die is very silky smooth to spin, right? When you go from one height of a case to another height, you got to make that little adjustment so that the drum will swing up, metering insert comes close to the end of the cutout but not bottoming out, right?
Yes.
So you get full dumping. And what I've encountered is on some systems, it's very difficult to adjust that powder die up and down. And it's really irritating because sometimes you have to make 10 different adjustments to get it exactly where you want. Well, this one, as long as you don't have spring pressure on it, this knurled portion of the die has grip, and it's pretty easy to move. So that makes it quick.
Most of the time I'm able to adjust that with it sitting on the mouth of a case. So I'll just adjust it. I'll have it a little bit higher than where it needs to be, and I'll run it down, and I'll just start turning that thing and watch the powder measure come up to the end of the slot, and then back it off a quarter turn and lock it down. And it takes quite a bit of time out of the setup process.
Yep. And then, of course, we've got the integrated light, which is a really nice touch, and we've got hookups for different sensors like the low primer sensor. And, that is just extra value built right into the machine. Love it.
Yep, and we wanted to make this thing flexible for future expansion. So every station on the tool head has its own power, ground, and signal going to it, so we can run dies that have their own microcontroller, so they can detect whatever we want them to detect and then report back to the tool head, and then it can process how it wants to alert you to that fault. That'll
be interesting. So before we go on to what's next, let's talk about the case feed system. So my first impression, you can hear this in the videos, it A, works pretty much perfectly from my experience so far, and B, is very silent. Variable speed, and of course auto shutoff. Probably one of the biggest things that's an improvement with this system over other systems I've used is there's 2 case feed plates, not 4. Typically you have small and large pistol, and you have small and large rifle. With this you have a pistol case feed plate with the feet that are reversible, and then you have the rifle. So how were you able to pull that off?
So the reversible feet on the pistol shell plate is the biggest thing. You can use large and small cases on the same plate with no adjustment, but if you're going to go like past an inch in case length on pistol, you really need to stand that plate up a little bit higher, or they'll all tip out. So we just have these little adjustable feet, or reversible feet, that you can either put on the top for short cases, or you can flip them to the bottom, and it stands that plate off about 3/16 of an inch, and then it just makes it work with longer cases a little bit better, like 357, 45 long Colt, that kind of stuff.
Very cool. Okay, so now let's talk about what's next. We know the bullet feeder is designed, being tested, I presume, in the hopper, in the product pipeline, right? Is there anything you can say about when that'll be available?
I don't want to nail down like too specific of a date, but it'll be after the 1st of 2023.
Okay. Well, again, I'll give you all updates as I get them. Anything else that is in the future for the X-10 that you can mention, or ideas that you have, or things you're working on?
We don't have anything that I'm at liberty to discuss, but there will be a lot of future products coming out for this machine.
I knew you were going to say that. Well, I think the addition of the bullet feeder, honestly, will really round out the value proposition, at this level. There isn't an auto drive yet, but every pull of the handle gives you a completed cartridge, out of the machine. And that really is where you want to be, right, for a manual machine in terms of workflow. So.
Yep, we definitely wanted to focus on getting everything 100% ironed out, because there's no point in trying to expand on a machine that's not adequate to begin with. So we just really wanted to be sure we got everything right here before we got too crazy with the accessories, but I think we're on the right track.
Oh, definitely. I'm really excited to have used this now, almost like 99.9% production machine here. It's been a lot of fun.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Mike, for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. If you guys have questions for Mike, drop a comment down in the comment section on this video. That concludes this video, and that means it's time to wrap it up. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up. Also, make your voice heard. If you have something to say, please drop a comment. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications, because you're not going to want to miss the awesome content that is coming up. And finally, flex your reloading pride. You could look great in one of these t-shirts. We've got multiple designs at the Ultimate Reloader store. I'll see you later because I'm off to go shooting.